Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, brought to you by the Capital One Spark Cash Plus card. What can unlimited 2% cash back do for your business? Capital One, what's in your wallet? I'm Jamie, that's Dave, that's Heath. We're looking at the sits for week number 9. And we'll start with my list with a player that Dave likes, that I dislike. We'll talk about Tom Brady in a second. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Darrell Henderson, avoid those two backfields for the Chiefs and the Rams respectively. Taysom Hill and TJ Hockenson, two tight ends that you want to sit for this week as well. Dave, let's talk about Brady. I'll give you the first word because you like him this week. I'm a little bit concerned. Tell people why they should be starting.
I think I'm just a little bit higher on him than you are. He's a low-end starter for me. I think he's been kind of unlucky and also a little bit bad at times over the last couple of weeks, but the conversation would be different if Cade Otton's touchdown last week wasn't called back, or if Mike Evans' deep ball drop against Carolina was actually caught and put into the end zone. He's been okay, and he's had 29 pass attempts in the red zone over his past 3 games, just only 2 touchdowns. That's going to come back his way a little bit. He's been doing an okay job avoiding pressure in the pocket, and I don't think this Rams pass defense is particularly good. We know that Jimmy Garoppolo had 21 fantasy points against them last week.
They gave up 36 fantasy points in week 1 to Josh Allen. The last 6 quarterbacks have averaged 11.5.
You know who those quarterbacks have been?
It's been ugly, but Brady's been ugly too. He's got 1 game with multiple touchdowns on the season, only 1. And last time he faced this defense in the playoffs, did not have Chris Godwin, but he threw for 329 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 1 fumble, 15 fantasy points. That's kind of where he's been all season, is around 15 to 19 fantasy points. I don't know if he's going to have much better than that, so I would try to avoid Brady this week. I know you would start Fields over him. I would start Trevor Lawrence over him this week. I think Lawrence against the Raiders is a better matchup. I'll take my chances there. In terms of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you just don't know what you're getting from the Chiefs running back situation. He's going to have to score. He's been miserable on the ground. This is not an easy team to run against from the Titans, and if they're blowing them out, maybe we see Pacheco, maybe we see more McKinnon. You said it, I think, very appropriately. McKinnon plays the most snaps. You don't get fantasy points for snaps. Pacheco's going to probably lead them in carries, and Clyde, best chance to score. So we'll see how things go there for him. And then Hockenson, I know that everybody's excited because now he's on the Vikings, and we're going to see, this new situation. Maybe they feature him. You know what? He played this Commanders defense in week 2 and struggled. He's been bad outside of really 1 game. He's got 3 games over 10 PPR points. I just don't think he's a slam dunk. Obviously, you feel the same way, Dave. You have him outside your top 12.
Yeah, I'm worried about how much he'll know in this offense. And you look at Minnesota's offense, I think they go to town with their wide receivers on the outside. I think you're going to see Jefferson have a monster game. I think Adam Thielen has a monster game. What's going to be left for Hockenson in his first game with Minnesota? I think if you're starting him, you're hoping that he catches a touchdown.
And it could happen. Kirk Cousins has thrown a touchdown to a tight end each of the last 2 games, but not a lot of production on top of that. So we'll see how Hockenson does in his debut with the Vikings. Heath, the sits for you. You got Matthew Stafford, Brian Robinson, Michael Pittman, Darnell Mooney, and Tyler Conklin. I'm curious about Conklin because I think you like him if there's no Matt Milano, correct?
This is totally dependent on what the Bills' injuries are like. So yes, if they're without Milano, if they're without Jordan Poyer, then you move him back into that top 10 discussion, top 12 discussion. But I do think, we've still seen games where he gets 6 targets and turns it into 22 yards. So even if he's got a better matchup, it's not a sure thing.
Right, and we're counting on him throwing a lot in this matchup. We'll talk about that in a second. But let's talk about Michael Pittman here because he's getting targets. He had 9 targets from Sam Ehlinger. This isn't exactly a lockdown secondary like we're used to for the Patriots, but it's just hard to trust right now, right?
Yeah, it's the quality of the targets are not particularly good. The total volume of the pass offense is not going to be very high. Like I said, they just threw 23 passes last week. And I don't think this is a very high-scoring game at all. We saw 33 total points in the Colts game with Washington last week. I think we see another extremely low-scoring game where both teams would rather just run the football.
Dave, you're still a little bit more optimistic, though.
Low-end number 2 type of fantasy wide receiver in PPR because I think he is going to get a decent amount of targets. And they've been using him in the short and the mid-range. At least they did last week with Ehlinger. Pierce was their shot play guy. So I think that you're going to continue to see that role for Pittman. Maybe he's got a shot to get 6 or 7 catches. You never know if he can break one a little bit, get himself maybe around 80, 90 yards.
I'm surprised you're calling Darnell Mooney a sit.
Okay.
Why?
Just because he's been so bad that everybody knows they should sit him? Because he's not done anything worthy of being started. Now they've added Chase Claypool. I don't know that Justin Fields being a top 12 quarterback is dependent upon Darnell Mooney being a good fantasy wide receiver. In fact, it's not, because Fields has been a top 5, top 6 quarterback the last month, and Mooney hasn't really done anything at all.
So it's a combination of lack of production, addition of Claypool, not matchup though.
It's not matchup at all. It has nothing to do with matchup. It's just what he's been so far this season, adding Claypool to the mix. I'm excited about the Bears. I'm excited about what Justin Fields is doing. It's not lifting up Darnell Mooney's ship, though.
Is he a 12 or 15 PPR point type of receiver? Is
He's
that
been,
where you'd
he's been
expect
12 in 3 of his last 5 games. That's kind of what you're looking at.
Yeah, so that's a flex in PPR, if you ask me.
Yeah, I guess the question will be, Heath has him outside of his top 36, so he's not even starting him in the 3 receiver league. So that's, I think, the part that surprises me is that in a week where there's 6 teams on a bye, matchups favorable, we like what Fields is doing. You expect this to be a good week for Darnell Mooney, but you're still pushing.
A lot of what I like what Fields is doing, though, is with his legs.
Sure.
Yeah, that's
Understandably so. All right, Dave, let's take a look at your sits here. You got a couple running backs here: Devin Singletary, Eno Benjamin, Christian Kirk, Garrett Wilson, and Taysom Hill. Curious about a couple of these guys. Start with Singletary because we know things are changing. Addition of Nyheim Hines. Is that the reason you're sitting him? Is it the matchup, or is it just the overall production from Devin?
Jamie, I'm not sure if Nyheim Hines is even going to play in the game. It won't be good for Singletary if he does, but even if he doesn't, I'm nervous about him. He's had 15 or more touches each of the past 2 games. He hasn't scored a touchdown. He's maxed out at 10 non-PPR or 14 PPR points. That's flex worthy. That might even be low-end number 2 running back worthy. But I'm nervous against this Jets defense. For all the trouble that the Jets have had this year, they've still done a nice job against running backs. 3.6 yards per carry to them over their past 3 games. That includes the Packers, includes the Broncos, but it includes the Patriots too. And the numbers that Ramondre Stevenson got last week that were really impressive, it was through the air. That's something we don't see enough from Devin Singletary.
Could be Nyheim Hines, like you said. We're not sure how much he's going to play, but if he does play, that's where the expectation would be, is that he's working the passing game. I'm surprised you're sitting Christian Kirk this week because the matchup is very favorable.
It is.
And this defense has really struggled with slot receivers all season long.
It's really close for me. He's definitely flex worthy. Don't think that he's a top 24 type of wide receiver. And I'm nervous about his ADOT. It's been shrinking. It's down to 9 yards over his past 3 games. His yards per target down to 7.3. His red zone targets, just 2 of those in his past 4 games. And I think Jacksonville might try and control the clock in this one. They've loved what they've gotten out of Travis Etienne. They could run the ball even more in this game against Las Vegas. Keep that pressure off of Trevor Lawrence, who's been making a lot of mistakes.
I think we've seen it the last 3 weeks, kind of the Christian Kirk story. He had the 7 for 96 against the Giants, 10 targets. The next week, he had a terrible efficiency game. It was 3 catches for 40 yards on 7 targets, but it's still 7 to 10 targets in each of his last 2 games. We saw that for most of the first half of the season. I think he's going to be a guy who catches 5 or 6 passes. I hope he gets into the end zone against the Raiders. It's a fantastic matchup.
And those last 3 weeks, really last 4 weeks, I mean, just in terms of, I guess, I'd take it even back further. Philly, Houston, Indy, Giants, Denver. Those are 5 of the best teams in terms of fantasy points allowed to opposing wide receivers. This Raiders team is not the case. So
one of the worst.
Hopefully he does deliver and gets those 7 to 10 targets. All right, Garrett Wilson, you're avoiding this week after he had a career high in yardage.
Yeah.
I don't mind Garrett Wilson. Is this a sit in 3 receiver leagues or just a sit across the board?
You could use him in 3 receiver leagues. I'd rather use Christian Kirk than Garrett Wilson in that type of format. I don't like what I'm seeing from Zach Wilson, and I feel like there's a fluky nature to what we saw last week. That 54-yard bomb, total improvisational play. If Zach Wilson were more, not even more, less erratic is probably the best way to put it when he's out on the field, I would love Garrett Wilson. Because then Zach Wilson would be able to move around the pocket, and he wouldn't be so scared to getting hit. He wouldn't throw the football away. He'd find where Garrett Wilson is downfield. There were multiple examples of that last week where Wilson got himself open, and Zach Wilson couldn't find him. He was too busy trying to throw the ball away, or just, he looked like he was really scared about getting hit. I don't blame him for it. It's tough to be a quarterback, especially in your second year in the National Football League. I think he's a flex at best, Jamie. You really don't want to take the chance on him to get any more than 12 PPR points.
I would agree. The thing that I like about it, though, and I think it's going to be the same thing, first game without Breece Hall, no Corey Davis, and we saw 41 pass attempts for Zach Wilson. Wilson's going to be bad. Zach Wilson's going to be bad.
Right.
But because of this volume and no Poyer, Tre'Davious White not playing, the secondary's still a little inconsistent. They've allowed a receiver to score 14 or more PPR points in 3 straight games. I think we're looking at 12 as the floor, with the chance if he scores
like a 6
to be better
for 60 game?
Yeah, I said 5 for 70, so that type of stat line. I think that's what we're going to get from Garrett Wilson. He's going to have 5 passes go over his head, but it's going to be where the volume just builds up. Same thing with Tyler Conklin. The volume will be there for these guys because that's what we saw with Joe Flacco early in the season, and now we're back to that because they can't run the ball without Breece Hall there, and they're probably chasing points maybe by the second quarter. So we'll see how things go there for Garrett Wilson. Just a little bit more optimistic. As you see, we're like 3 or 4 spots away in the rankings.